I'm not going to make a habit of commenting on the plays for which I have created these little dramatic monologue sonnets, but The Merchant of Venice is a slightly thorny one because of different views about it being anti-Semitic or just about anti-Semitism, and also because of current concerns about things like what is called cultural appropriation and using stereotypes and so forth. The first thing to say is if I could have got away convincingly with a beard, ringlets, doing the full thing you might do on a stage to represent Shylock, I would have done. But I can't. I don't have access to a makeup department to make the beard look realistic, etc., etc. So what I've done is I've shot him from the back, taken notionally a period after the judgment goes against him, and he is wrapped in what actually happens to be a curtain, but could be a wall hanging. He's ripped down while half his goods are being confiscated, and he's sitting on some steps complaining to himself and to the world about the injustice of the whole thing. I suppose the accent is a stereotype, but then it wouldn't sound realistic at all in just my own voice. Of course, in one sense, there is no Jewish accent because Jews are spread all over the world, so they speak whatever the accent is of their locality where they've been brought up and so forth. But nevertheless, I needed to differentiate it from just my own voice in the same way I do with Macduff. I mean, I have no idea whether my Scottish accent for Macduff drifts north, south, east, west. I know it's not Edinburgh Morningside, I've not done that, but how whether it goes from the Western Isles to the Firth or Forth, I've no idea, I'm not an expert, but nevertheless it just sounds stupid to have Macduff giving Bourgeon his grief in an English accent. So, and similarly for many other characters I've chosen accents. So this is not, in my view, cultural appropriation, any of this, because for me, appropriation is when you take something as of right, say it's yours, and you take it away from the other person. And I think this is where a lot of the so-called cultural wars have got themselves into a difficulty, because there's this idea that if you borrow from my culture, you are somehow diminishing me and the importance of these things to my culture. I can't see it in the same way, and I'm sort of digressing slightly, that those people who think that it is justified to commit acts of violence, including killing people, against those they regard as blaspheming because they have said something about their God, their ideals, the holy book, or whatever, they are in a way saying, your disrespect for my God, my ideals, my holy book, diminishes them. Sorry? If the book is holy, if the God is a great God and sanctified, if the ideals are worth having, does somebody else's disrespect make them less so? It hurts, yeah, I know that. I mean, I've had people disrespect Shakespeare. Oh dear. But that doesn't diminish Shakespeare, just makes me feel a bit upset. But that's all. And so, in my view, the proper response to acts of blasphemy should be, for those who get the reference, Captain Mannering in Dad's Army. Stupid boy. And that's that. It's the other person's stupidity. Right, so a play that is anti-Semitic or a play about anti-Semitism or both? Well, I think for myself, the answer is it is a bit of both. There is no doubt that Shylock is to some extent set up to be a figure of fun, at the very least, if not to be despised by the Elizabethan audience. So they recognise the type, yep. And when Shylock has his discussion with Tubal about the loss of his money, which his daughter has stolen from him, which she's run off with this Christian, it's the money that hurts him more than the loss of the daughter. So in that sense, yes, stereotypical, rather anti-Semitic. But in the same way that we, in a modern world, some of us would say that treating your daughter as your property, deciding whom she will marry, arranged marriage and so forth, is morally wrong. For some people it's morally right. They think this is keeping their culture together. But from our modern point of view, in Britain, well, most people would say no. And so in that sense, Shylock's dismissal of the value of his daughter is no greater than one sees in some areas within cultures within the UK anyway. But yeah, it is stereotype. It is Fagin, really, isn't it? Oh, my money, my money. Why is Shylock a moneylender? I borrow here from a website called Jewish Learning, which gives two reasons why Jews tend to be associated with money. The first is historical. The most common explanation has been the exclusion of European Jews in the Middle Ages from various guilds, their confinement to ghettos, and restrictions preventing them from owning land. Additionally, medieval Christian theology held that charging interest was sinful, which kept many Christians from becoming financiers, and therefore the field came to be dominated by Jews. And of course, particularly now, still the lending of money is important for business, whether it's investors or whether it's borrowing from the bank to get your business going. Very often, I mean, the whole world seems to work on borrowed money, governments too. So the merchants of Venice need sources of ready money to fund their expeditions from which they will, all being well, eventually make a profit. So they do need to put the outlay. They don't necessarily have the outlay themselves or for the full outlay at the beginning. So money lending is a very important aspect of commercial ventures. It was, and it still is. There is also an alternative explanation, which is given in this website, which is that the Jews were educated. They put a high value on education and learning. And so those who educated themselves remained Jews, whereas those who did not assimilated or converted to other faiths. And over time, the Jewish community evolved into a uniquely educated population, which in turn incentivized Jews to abandon farming in favour of better paying professions and businesses. But Shakespeare does something which he very often does, which is he takes a character, he sets you up to look at this character in one way, and then he pulls the rug from under your feet. But the great speech where Shylock lists how he has been treated by Antonio and presumably other Venetians, and treated in the following way: he hath disgraced me, and laughed at my losses, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes, hath not a Jew hands, August mentions, and he, again, and of course this ends with the great phrase, if you prick us, do we not bleed? And Shakespeare certainly presents the humanity of Shylock. He is a human being. And Shylock says to Antonio at the beginning, you spit on me and you call me dog. You want my money? And it is very noticeable that in all societies where there's an underclass, and I would say that is all societies, I can't really think of one where there isn't, the underclass is often referred to in non-human terms. And when it gets to committing violence against them, then very often they are animalistic terms. So Nazis referred to Jews as vermin, as rats. Hutu during the massacres in Rwanda, the Tutsis were cockroaches. I read the other day about someone on a blog in Russia who referred to the non-human Ukrainians. And that is what happens, that there is the dehumanizing through the terminology. It's a common thing as a weapon against all underclasses. But as I say, Shakespeare manipulates us and then gives us the humanity of Shylock in the same way he does this with Feste in Twelfth Night. Viola stroke Cesario says, I warrant thou art a merry fellow and carest for nothing. And Feste says, not so, sir. I do care for something. But in my conscience, sir, I do not care for you. If that be to care for nothing, sir, I would it might make you invisible. But that sudden seriousness, I do care for something. Dogberry, the sort of ridiculous constable in Much Ado About Nothing, is listing his qualities, and it's all kind of it's all silly really, until he suddenly says that he is a fellow that hath had losses, and that can suddenly sudden seriousness, and it's often I've noticed translated in these student commentaries as someone who has suffered hardships, not necessarily financial losses, although it does come after a reference to I've had money and so forth, and I've had losses, but I am human. Shakespeare manipulates us with Macbeth. When he is a murderer, we watch him, but that news on the battlements, the Queen, my lord, is dead. She should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace, etc. Suddenly, it starts to feel sympathy for this moral shell of a man. One of the other things I would say is that, about the difficulty of the play, is that it's nominally a comedy. And we often make a mistake thinking that the Merchant of Venice is Shylock, because Shylock is the character who remains with us as in a sense as one of the protagonists, but he's not the merchant. The merchant is Antonio, and he, to be honest, is quite stupid. I mean, would you sign a bond like that rather than go and find somebody else to lend you money? You're overconfident and he pays for it, but his dramatic line is that of comedy. He comes very close to tragedy, very close to destruction, and then is rescued from it. Whereas Shylock, his dramatic role is that of the revenger. You might say one of the litmus tests about anti-Semitism is, could it have been written by a Jew? To which I think the answer is some parts definitely not. As for instance, parts I pointed to about the stock miser description or presentation of Shylock. But other parts, if you prick me, do I not bleed? And the revenge theme, yes, I mean, this is Shylock who says, I am taking revenge for all the disdain and insults that have been heaped upon me. And he explains that to Antonio, and in the end he explains that to the court. And in line with many revengers in Elizabethan and Jacobean drama, because he isn't allowed to get away with it. He gets very close to having his revenge, and then it's taken away from him. The rug is pulled out from under his feet. The tragedy for Shylock is that his revenge is thwarted. And the judgment at the end is, you can take it many ways, and it kind of bounces around, I think, between different moral viewpoints. First of all, the judgment is that Shylock, as an alien that by direct or indirect attempts has sought the life of any citizen, that one half of the goods should be given to the person against whom he has offended, and the other half taken by the state. So, in fact, stripped of everything, chucked out onto the streets with nothing. That's the initial judgment. And it's because he's not part of this society. He is an alien. He does not belong. And that is a kind of crucial. He is the outsider figure who lives and works within the society but is simply not accepted. And the laws are against him, more than they are perhaps against others. And one character who revels in this is Gratiano. I do find him most repulsive. I think if I were producing the play, with all his commentaries, particularly in the trial, about, oh, Daniel, the second die will come to judgment, and he really mocks Shylock at every turn that goes against Shylock. I would have him get right up close and do it into Shylock's face, right up here. Antonio is asked by the judges, can he show any mercy to Shylock? Mercy is a funny word. I mean, most of the Christians in this play are really smug and quite insufferable, and I include Portia in that. And she takes over in the court as if she were judge and jury. She starts making decisions, and the court sort of follows. I mean, she's quite a force of nature, but even so, the law is not exactly working independently, put it that way. The mercy of Antonio is to say, well, I won't accept the half of Shylock's goods that should be mine, but I want the other half. The half will go into fine, and yet I wish to have it to my use, to help my friends, Lorenzo, and make sure that on his death all the money goes to Lorenzo, and the daughter Jessica is not cut out of the inheritance. And then he says that he must convert to being a Christian. Well, let's put the dagger in and twist the knife, shall we? Shylock, first of all, has everything material taken away from him. Then that is slightly mitigated, but then he has his spiritual side is negated. No, you must become a Christian, and the court says, on pain of death. What has Shylock got left? You could argue that materially he could even start again, but they take away his religion, his faith, or insist he does not follow it, does not show it, and he's got to pretend to be a good Christian. So, I'm not sure that's justice. That is the court seeking its revenge. So in many ways, I do see The Merchant of Venice as a revenge play. First, Shylock seeking his revenge, that's thwarted, and the Christians take their revenge. And that fits because Shylock has said, when talking about his own revenge, he's saying, I only do what you, i.e. Christians, have taught me. You have taught me how to behave. I do the same to you. And perhaps this mercy, in inverted commas, which the court shows to Shylock, supposedly, puts into some kind of perspective the mercy about which Portia has her great speech, The Quality of Mercy. Because I also think that if you dig down into the play, there's a bit of an investigation into what mercy is. Anyway, I'm sure I've said enough.